Welcome to the Daily Insider here on Vegas Insider. I am Kevin Rogers, and today is Wednesday, April 20th, 2022. And a lot of baseball talk today on the show. Looking forward to this conversation. Nick Pollack's going to join us coming up in just a moment. He runs Pitchers List, and anything you need to know about pitchers in Major League Baseball, he has it. And a lot to go over. Already these teams playing 10 games or so we're getting a little bit of a sample size through the first two series, and a lot of baseball today. We'll get some NBA playoffs also in a little while, but I am looking forward to getting right into this conversation. So let's do it right now. Nick Pollack joining us. Pitcher List. That's right. You can find him on Twitter right there. Nick, good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on. And first of all, what is your site? What is Pitcher List? What do you do there for people to help win or help?
Sure. First of all, thanks so much, Kevin, for having me on here. Pitcher List is your all-encompassing fantasy baseball website. We have GIFs of every single pitch that every single pitcher throws on their StatCast-laden player pages you want to check out. I rank the top 100 starting pitchers every single Monday. I do a full recap of all starting pitchers every single night on the site that you don't want to check out. Streamers for the day. It's got everything you need. So if you play fantasy baseball, you want to stay in the know, you got to come to Pitcher List. We have you completely covered.
How long have you had this site? When did you come up with the idea for this?
Yeah, I started this in 2014. So it's been about 8 years now. We got shut down actually by MLB in 2014 as pitcher gifts. When I originally had the idea to have a gift database of every pitcher in the majors. But I've enjoyed the writing so much. I've done that SP roundup every single day of the baseball season since 2015. So it's just been a lot of fun. We have a large staff covering everything you need to know about baseball now, and we're excited for the season ahead.
So I want to go over a couple of pitchers from last night, at least some of the big names. And
yeah,
I want to start first with, you're in New York. I want to start with Garrett Cole. What's going on with Garrett Cole? Why is he struggling so much? I know his first start against the Red Sox, he had a horrible first inning. Yankees came back and won that game. Then Vlad lit him up last time, or when he pitched at home against Toronto. And then last night, he last 2 innings against Detroit. What's going on with him? Why is he struggling so much right now?
Yeah, sure. It's funny you say my New York team, because as a kid growing up in Brooklyn, 5-year-old me wanted to be happy in life. So I am a Yankee fan at heart, but really I am all about pitching these days. And Garrett Cole, yeah, this has been really, really frustrating. What happened in each of those starts, there's an explanation, right? For the Red Sox, the opening ceremonies had him off his rhythm, is what he was saying in that first inning. And then in that second start, Garrett Cole just allowed things to Vladdy, and everything else was good. It was just Vlad Guerrero did really well. What happened yesterday was a fine first inning, and then all of a sudden the Tigers had this massive start to the second. They took so long to get through it, I should say, and the Yankees capitalized on that. But then Cole was out of rhythm. If you see his fastball command from the first to the second, it was completely off. And he just didn't find a rhythm. And what do you know? He walks 4 batters, including walking in a run. This year, it is interesting, and we'll say, though, about Garrett Cole is that he has added something to his mix. He's added this cutter that comes in around the low 90s, as opposed to just the fastball, slider, curveball, changeup mix. And he's using it more behind in counts, but when he needed it yesterday, it didn't quite show up the way he wanted to. It was just a terrible day. And I know it's so easy for us to look at Garrett Cole and say, oh, well, he's supposed to be amazing every single night. He's essentially the SP1 in fantasy baseball land. But, you know, it's 3 starts. It's been strange. Everyone's been talking about how April pitching quality is just depressed because of no spring training. And yeah, he's going to be fine. This has been weird and strange, but Garrett Cole is still throwing hard. He still gets a lot of whiffs. He's going to be okay. And if you're in a fantasy league where someone is actively trying to sell Garrett Cole, I'd be completely all over that.
Because it feels like, Nick, even go back to last year, the talk with the substance or whatever it was, where he didn't want to talk about that in the press conference, or he went away from it. He went a long time. He struggled. That he had a lot of starts allowing 4 or 5 runs. And yes, he's still elite. Like, we can't take that away. But it feels like it's been a while since he's been at that elite level.
Sure. So what happened last year is he decided to change his approach after the sticky stuff. He lost faith in his four-seamer, which he shouldn't have done. But he thought that without the sticky stuff, he wouldn't get as much rise on the fastball up. So he decided to go down to the zone with it. And he got burned with it, because that's just not how Garrett Cole's fastball works well. So then he actually returned to it later on the second half, and he did great. He had these incredible starts against the Astros and the Angels, but then he had a hamstring injury. And so that's why we don't really talk so much about the ascension of Cole in that second half, because he didn't have as much of it as we'd want to see. So I'm actually not too worried about the whole sticky stuff thing. I don't think that now that he doesn't have spider attack, that Garrett Cole is not one of the premier pitchers in baseball. He still is. He's just going through a rough stretch that is getting amplified because it's the first 3 starts of the year.
Now, on the other side of New York, this guy's a freaking animal. I'll tell you, Max Scherzer, he's unbelievable. He goes to the Mets in the offseason. Again, we didn't know when the season would start with all the lockout stuff. He signs this mega deal with the Mets after spending the end of last year with the Dodgers. They don't make the World Series, but he just keeps doing it. What is it about Max Scherzer, Nick, that he just can keep grinding it up? His first start at Citi Field, 10 strikeouts, 1 hit in 7 innings. They beat the Giants. I'm not going to say playoff preview, still a long way to go, but what is about this guy? He goes everywhere. He still produces all these great numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a really great repertoire that Max Scherzer has. It's a very fantastic fastball that constantly just gets whiffs and misses bats. And even though it's not necessarily the 95 that we've seen before, still being around 94 is very good for Max Scherzer. He has a slider and a cutter and a curveball he throws early in counts. He can go longer in games because he's just done it for ages. I mean, I will say this, relatively to the SP landscape, a guy like Max Scherzer isn't as unique in previous seasons. If you think about the guys in the teens we would always have these pitchers that would go 180 innings, 200 innings, and would carve out consistent starts. But nowadays, we're finding it harder to come up with those kinds of pitchers. Max Scherzer's a wonderful artifact of those times. And yeah, he just has amazing stuff. There's not much more I can say. He's going to be great for the Mets this year.
Now, another Max that pitched very well last night, Max Fried. And he had problems, Nick, with the Dodgers last year in the NLCS and struggled a bit his first 2 starts, was a heavy favorite in each of those games. Didn't cash. He was an underdog opposite Walker Buehler last night. Braves got to Buehler early. Fried was fantastic. 7 scoreless innings, 2 hits, 3-1 win over the Dodgers. And again, there's a lot going on in that series with Freddie Freeman on the other side. But Max Fried finally got over the demons of the Dodgers a little bit. So now a bit of a turnaround for him.
Oh, absolutely. Max Fried actually last year, if you remember, across his first 3 starts, he allowed 14 earned runs and then had a sub-3 ERA and cruised once he returned from that injury in May. It was insane. We love to see it. And yeah, he struggled a little bit to start this season. I think the best indication of a great Max Fried is how long he went in this game. In his 7th inning, arguably was his best of the entire game, where he faced 4 batters, struck out 3 of them. And then the other batter was Trey Turner hitting a little dribbler just past Max Fried for an infield single. His command was fantastic. He also introduced this changeup deeper in the game. He got 3 of his strikeouts, or actually 3 of those outs, on changeups at the end of the game, which is not Max Fried's game plan. Normally it's fastball, curveball, slider. With this very rare changeup, he had 2 strikeouts, and that little dribbler was off of excellent changes for the plate. It was great stuff from Max Fried, and he's throwing harder this year. He's at 95 instead of 94 on that fastball. We didn't see the command of it the first 2 starts, but now that he's locked in very clearly, I think you can anticipate Max Fried being a workhorse for this Atlanta Braves team through the year.
Nick, how much do you believe in Robbie Ray? That he won the Cy Young last year in Toronto. He was a guy in Arizona that felt like 5 innings, 9 strikeouts, and it was just a strikeout or a hit. That's what he did. But coming to Seattle, first start, beat Minnesota, got knocked around by the White Sox last time out, beat the Rangers last night, his first start at home. Do you think Robbie Ray can keep this up moving forward, what he did last year in Toronto?
Yeah, it's really tough to tell at this point because what we saw last year were a couple of adjustments in Robbie Ray's favor. One, he started throwing fastballs consistently inside the zone instead of trying to nibble around the edges, lowered his walk rate dramatically because of that. And he also increased his velocity on his fastball to about 94, 95 miles per hour from 93, 94. Those 2 things combined, guys couldn't hit the fastball well. He has incredible slider and also a curveball that he had on top of it. And it was a Cy Young campaign. This year in Seattle, we're seeing more the same of his approach inside the zone, but it's not quite the same velocity that we saw last season. It was about 92.7 yesterday. Earlier starts is even at 91, 92, and we're a little scared, but it is ramping up in the direction that we want to see it. The first 2 starts were also this terrible weather that he had to deal with. And I like to believe that Robbie Ray, especially in Seattle, with an offense that will support him constantly, he'll often go at least 6 frames. They want him to be that stalwart stud through the entire year. And I think Ray's velocity is not going to be 91, 92. It's going to be more of that 93 range moving forward as he ramps up, as well as the entire league ramps up, as again, because only 2-3 weeks of spring training is just not enough for these guys to be their best selves. So I think Robbie Ray is going to be very similar to last year. Not as good, 90% left on base rate. If you're not familiar with that, is incredibly lucky. And normally we see around 75%. So he should be turning some of those guys on base into more runs this year. But Robbie Ray is going to be an absolute stud for and a rock really for that Mariners rotation. And I would trust him constantly in my daily leagues.
Now, Nick, on pitcher list, you have a lot of, how do I say this? Like categories, I guess you would call that.
Sure.
Frozen banana is one of them. Birthday party. Can you please tell the viewers what exactly that means? You called Carlos Hernandez a frozen banana, and I had to look that one up. So what does all that mean?
Right. So these are the fun terms I've come up with across the years. I've been doing this for 8 years, and I found that there are groupings you can give guys. So if you're on the site, you can always just hover over it, and I have the definition for you. But a frozen banana, for example, is somebody that I don't want to go after right now, but when he thaws and actually blossoms, maybe I'll consider eating a banana then. So maybe when Carlos Hernandez has proper command of his secondaries and his fastball, because he does throw upper 90s and has shown that he can get whiffs on curveballs and sliders at times, then maybe I'll be interested in pursuing him in my fantasy leagues. Another popular one is a Toby, which is someone who is just barely good enough for your than the guys in the waiver wire, but you're not happy that he's there. Just like Toby from The Office. He gets his work done, but you're not thrilled that he's around the office.
I love how you pick up a Toby reference, because nobody wants to talk. Well, Michael Scott didn't want to talk to Toby. He hated him.
Right.
But I think everyone else is fine. But wrapping up last night before we look ahead to tonight, anybody else that stuck out to you? I know Josiah Gray of the Nationals, who came over in that Max Scherzer deal, that he wasn't great at home a lot last year. Finally got that home win over Arizona yesterday. We know the Diamondbacks aren't great offensively, but who else stuck out to you besides the Scherzers, the Frieds, those guys? Josiah Gray is one from Washington, but who else really stuck out to you yesterday? Some of the under the radar guys.
Sure. There are so many interesting starts from yesterday. I mean, you could talk about Framber Valdez a bit, who did not have a good outing yesterday against the Angels, but honestly, I think he's going to be just fine. This is what Framber Valdez does. He goes through these moments where he's walking a couple of guys and just gets hit around a little bit harder. Then the next time his curveball is just so good. And he's going to be amazing. For Josiah Gray, I think we're not seeing the best of him yet. And I think that was more of the Diamondbacks just not being good. I mean, look at Yoan Don, who did well yesterday. And his stuff clearly is not as fully developed as we want it to be either. So I'd be a little bit cautious about those two guys. Someone else that's been a hot topic is Jesus Luzardo. And we don't really know who he is. He had 12 strikeouts in that first outing against the Angels. Then yesterday really struggled against the Cardinals, but the stuff was still there. He's throwing 2 ticks harder at 97 miles per hour. And more importantly, he's throwing his curveball over 40% of the time. That usage shift we saw at the end of last year saw some success, and he's carrying it over into this year with that added velocity. I think things are going to go his way more often than not this year. So Jesus Luzardo, even though he had that sobering start yesterday against the Cardinals, I'm very excited for what's ahead.
Now, Nick, looking at today's schedule and Shohei Ohtani, he has struggled on the road since coming up to the majors. And it's been that way. I mean, he's fantastic. We know what he is. But on the road, he's had problems against the Astros, lost them earlier this year. Didn't pitch bad, but the offense couldn't get going in that game. Tonight, the Angels favored at Houston. Ohtani can try to bounce back from that Rangers loss, gave up the grand slam in that game. What do you think about Ohtani's chances tonight for the Angels to beat the Astros again?
You know, it's not I think a lot of people look at, oh, he did this last time against this one team, then it's going to be the same. And I don't feel that way whatsoever. I just look at what the ability is of the pitcher himself. And Ohtani is fantastic. The splitter is phenomenal. The slider is great. He also has a cutter now to help him get some strikes. And the fastball still comes in 95 plus. I think those that are starting Shohei Ohtani tonight will be really, really thrilled about it. And he's also someone that isn't necessarily babied in his starts. Yes, there is the concern through the entire season. But if you look at one singular start, he constantly goes 6+ innings for the Angels. You can see a lot of strikeouts with this. I think he'll make the adjustments he needs to from that other start against the Astros. I love Ohtani today.
Now, you mentioned Jesus Luzardo. The Marlins just lost to the Cardinals. Now, Sandy Alcantara goes tonight. Alcantara's interesting, Nick, because he was with the Cardinals. They traded him to the Marlins. He's pitched well against St. Louis, but has had a lot of bad luck against the Cardinals. They lost a 1-0 game last year at Busch Stadium on a walk-off single, and he just hasn't been able to get over the hump against him. But I believe it's 3 career starts, 1.50 ERA. The Marlins are 0-3 in those games. What do you think about Alcantara tonight as a home favorite trying to bounce back against the Cardinals?
I am such a Sandy Alcantara fan. I have been since I don't know, February of last year, before he had his breakout season. And the biggest change that happened for Alcantara in the middle of last season was increasing his slider usage instead of the changeup. He went from about a 20% slider and 30% changeup and flipped it. All of a sudden had these incredible double-digit strikeout games. And it's rooted in an incredible fastball that comes in at upper 90s, 97, 98 miles per hour. They jams inside and gets these quick, efficient outs. And like we talked about before with Scherzer, he's one of those rare guys that can go so deep into games. It wouldn't shock me if he goes 7 innings tonight and just carves up batters. I adore Sandy Alcantara. We haven't seen the pristine command quite yet. The first 2 starts were a little bit shaky, but it doesn't matter if he's facing the Cardinals, if he's facing the Dodgers, if he's facing the Pirates. Sandy Alcantara can go and dominate on a given night, and I'm willing to bet that the first 2 starts are behind him now, and that he's going to dominate the Cardinals.
Nick, who is the one pitcher today you're looking to go against? Who's the one guy you think is going to get a rack today?
Oh, absolutely wrecked today. Oh, that's a good question. I normally am such a positive guy when it comes to pitching that I don't consider the other side of it, who's going to do poorly. I would be careful about Tony Gonsolin against Atlanta. Tony Gonsolin, I know we have this really nice opinion of him. 2020, he came and dominate, and we're just waiting for him to get these proper chances. But I will say, Tony Gonsolin's slider has not been there, and that was a huge element of his success. The splitter, yes, has gotten some whiffs. The fastball's a little bit behind on velocity, but without that slider getting consistent strikes, it's really easy for guys to just sit heater and dominate against Tony Gonsolin and not go long in games. So I might be considering stacking the Atlanta offense there.
And also, too, you got to believe on the flip side, after Charlie Morton struggled against San Diego last time out, where really he wasn't terrible. It's just giving up those singles and keeping the inning alive. And I think there's a few walks in that first inning against San Diego. His last start, I believe Morton would probably bounce back here in this spot, too, against LA.
Definitely. Yeah, he got singled out in that one. Yep. And last year, if you remember, Charlie Morton struggled early on and then adjusted to become a 3 ERA for the entire season, including those early struggles. It's not abnormal for him to go through a rough spell early in the season, but I do believe that Charlie Morton understands how to adjust here. This is not the end of Charlie Morton. And with that incredible curveball, Morton could do very well against the Dodgers.
Nick, before I let you go, I want your opinion on this, please, since this is what you do. You follow pitchers all the time. What do you find? Give me the most meaningful statistic you evaluate pitchers on and the most meaningless statistic that you think people should throw out when looking at pitchers.
I would say, first and foremost, don't care about ERA as much as people really lean on it. It's more so about the CSW and their strike rates of the pitches that they throw individually. You want pitches that players can throw confidently for strikes so they're not getting destroyed on. And CSW is called strikes plus whiffs. Essentially says, hey, how many times are they throwing this pitch and getting a net positive for the pitcher? When you start seeing 40% marks all of a sudden on their secondaries and their fastballs, you know something is going great for them. Obviously, the big thing is velocity. But really, if guys are having high CSW rates across their entire repertoire, you look at Reed Detmers, who just had a bad start against the Rangers. I love his curveball and I love his fastball, and they perform well individually. But as you mentioned, sometimes things just get hit. It doesn't go their way. And it's easy for us to look at the ERA and just toss it out. But what we should really be doing is look at the individual pitches, and you'll have a better understanding of how they performed and how they could perform in the future.
Nick Pollack, you could find him on Twitter at Pitcher List. You could find his website too, right? Pitcherlist.com, Nick?
Absolutely.
And if not only for gambling, but also for fantasy purposes too. And Nick has got it. Nick and his team have a great breakdown of every starting pitcher, what they did the night before, and you can find in the morning, and all that information is there. So check it out at pitcherlist.com. If you are big into baseball, this is what you need to find out every morning. Nick, we appreciate the time. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, there is Nick Pollack, pitcher list. And look, it's a lot of good information there. And he's got a good following on Twitter as well. And listen, it's a big job. It really is to follow all these starting pitchers. When there's 15 games a night, that's 30 starting pitchers you got to worry about. And yes, you're going to eventually get a feel for, I mean, look, Scherzer, Cole, like these guys, we been around for a long time. But when you look at, Tyler Gilbert with the Diamondbacks, you look at someone else like, I'm trying to find some other names from last night, even a Carlos Hernandez with the Royals, Tyler McGill with the Mets, who's getting now a lot more run with Jacob deGrom being sidelined, Justin Steele with the Cubs, Southpaw. There's just a lot of other names that if you're going to be successful in baseball, that you got to know them too, not just the likes of the Coles and the Scherzers, the deGroms, when you go through some of them. But there's value you can find in these pitchers. So if you want to find a different way of looking at these pitchers as opposed to just, obviously win-loss record, which I know is not something that is not an indicative statistic for these pitchers, because it depends on what the rest of the team does. But other things, they're on there. You can find them on pitcherlist.com. So it's a pretty cool thing that Nick has on there. We're going to look at the NBA playoffs in just a second. First, I want to tell you about SI Sportsbook. And it's legal in the state of Colorado. You can get up to $300 in free bets. The promo code is AFF300. This is for new users only, by the way. Make your first bet of $20 or more and get a $60 free bet. And full terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 years or older to play. So check it out now, sisportsbook.com. Sports Illustrated Sportsbook, again, legal in the state of Colorado. So, all right, now let's transition over to some NBA. And at least going back to last night, you had the three game twos, and you had one team go up 2-0. That's the Heat, as they beat the Hawks at FTX Arena last night. And Jimmy Butler had a huge game for the Heat. And look, this Atlanta team, not a lot of excuses now. They wanted to use the excuse on Sunday after they lost to the Heat. Well, it was a 1:00 game, and we played Friday night, and the Heat had an advantage. Well, the Heat are the number 1 seed. They should have an advantage over you when the Hawks are an 8 seed and had to play 2 play-in games. So, too bad. Trae Young had 25 points last night, so a better night than the first game when he had a 1 of 12 shooting night, but he was 2 of 10 from 3, had 10 turnovers. So that's not good. Jimmy Butler had 45 points. Jimmy Butler, not always a three-point threat. He was 4 of 7 from 3, took 25 shots, made 15 of them, only 9 points for Bam Adebayo. But the Heat, though, they took care of business and they beat the Hawks. So now up 2-0 in that series. Meanwhile, Memphis, they desperately needed to win. And I'm not trying to say that Memphis would not have won if they fell down 2-0, but the Grizzlies really had to come out and play well. 1 point came after the first quarter, and then it was just cruise control for the Grizzlies. They outscored the Timberwolves by 10 in the second and pretty much ran away from Minnesota. Minnesota, 96 points. They were 11 of 38 from 3. So when the Timberwolves don't hit their threes, I mean, I know you can say about anybody that they don't hit their shots, but Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards combined for 35 points. That's not going to win you a lot of games against this Memphis team. And John Morant had 23. They spread out the scoring. They weren't great from 3 either, Memphis, 11 of 34. But still hit 25 free throws. One thing about Memphis, a lot of free throws that they shoot, and they were able to get back in the series 1-1, but at least now make it 1-1 going to Minnesota, where it's not crazy if the Grizzlies win a couple games at Target Center. Now, the big upset last night was New Orleans, who went into Phoenix and beat the Suns 125-114. Now, again, the small print on this game is Devin Booker left with injury. But still, Brandon Ingram led the Pelicans to, again, one of their biggest wins they've had in franchise history. I'm not crazy to say that. 37 points for Brandon Ingram. CJ McCollum had 23. And Devin Booker at 31 in 25 minutes, but still got hurt. Chris Paul didn't shoot the ball well, finished with 17 points. Again, we'll see how the Suns do, because this is kind of like the Luka situation a little bit in Dallas, where, yes, Phoenix has more pieces than Dallas does to be without Devin Booker. You still have Chris Paul, you still have DeAndre Ayton. There's still, parts there. But Phoenix better hope that they don't have Devin Booker out for too long. Look, I wouldn't necessarily say if Devin Booker's out for an extended period of time that the Suns will be eliminated. The Suns should knock out the Pelicans. They have home court, split New Orleans. You still have 2 at home, but you have 125 in the Pelicans. New Orleans are playing they're playing with house money, and they have two dynamic scorers in Ingram and McCollum. But you wonder with Phoenix here, after last year's meltdown in the NBA Finals, hopefully this doesn't happen again. Again, it's not their fault if Booker's hurt. But still, maybe you want to grab Phoenix on the series price now, 1-1, and hope that they can take care of business. Obviously, Phoenix, an easier path past New Orleans than Dallas has without Luka against Utah. And I still believe in that Dallas series, that sit Luka game 3, try to win game 3 if you don't have Luka play game 4, if he could play. And we don't know his condition. That's the issue. We assume these guys are not as hurt as they really are. So I think that's the biggest issue of all of it, that Luka, go out and play. It's an important game. We don't know how hurt he is. He can be more hurt than we think. So Phoenix now tied at 1 with New Orleans in that series, heading back to the Big Easy. Tonight, you got 3 games. Nets Celtics. That's the number 1 game that a lot of people will be keeping an eye on. And let's see if Kyrie can control himself tonight. He was fined $50,000 for the middle fingers the other day. And, is Kyrie being too sensitive? That's the question going in. Kyrie's still fantastic. Durant's fantastic. We can't take that away from the Brooklyn Nets. But fact of the matter is, they're still down 1-0, and they're in a must-win spot. Boston is not in a must-win spot. Yeah, they lose. They're 1-1 going to Brooklyn. Okay. But you're telling me the Nets down 2-0 are fine, even going back home? I'm not too sure about that. I do like the Celtics tonight. I think a lot of people will be on the Nets, seeing what happened, how Brooklyn lost the end of game 1 on the Jason Tatum layup. But Celtics laying 3.5. They laid 4.5 in game 1. Now they're laying 3.5. Total still around the same spot, 226.5 at SI Sportsbook. But I do like Boston in this game tonight to take a 2-0 series lead. I think they will knock off the Nets once again. That one thing that the Nets have not done is slow down Jason Tatum. That's the one thing they have not done, and we'll see if they do that coming up tonight. This series has gone off the rails, this 76ers Raptors series, just because of the injuries with Toronto. And Philadelphia up 2-0 over the Raptors here. Game 1, Philly won by 20. Game 2, they won by 15. And the Sixers team right now, look, they're getting the contributions they need from a guy like Tyrese Maxey, 23 in game 2, Embiid at 31. Tobias Harris had 20 and 10 rebounds. James Harden, what's so funny about him is 3 of 9 from the floor. He had 9 shots he took in game 2, scored 14 points. You're not getting crazy games out of James Harden right now, but the Sixers are still winning. No thigh ball because he's not fully vaccinated, so he can't play for Toronto tonight. And the Raptors can only go so far with Fred VanVleet, with Siakam. Both of them didn't shoot well in game 2. Scotty Barnes's status, he's still doubtful for tonight. So the Raptors in big trouble. And I mean, I hate using the word trap. I don't know if that's what this is in this game tonight. Philly's got all the momentum. Toronto trying to save their season going back home because they lose tonight down 3-0, then they're toast. But this Raptor team, it's just about bodies. If you don't have those bodies there, like Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet aren't going to combine for 70, 80 points. You don't have enough behind you like Philadelphia does. Philadelphia still has some other guys that could score besides Embiid, Harden, and now Maxey, now Tobias Harris. I mean, Tobias Harris has always been a good scorer, but you have all these guys that can score in Philadelphia, where Toronto just, without Barnes, without Gary Trent, they just don't have it. Simple as that. The final game of the night, the Bucks and the Bulls in Milwaukee, and you had a very ugly game one, just from a shooting standpoint on every side, with what Chicago did, with what Milwaukee did, and somehow the Bulls had a shot in this game. They were getting destroyed in that first quarter, down 13 at the end of one. They were down, I think, 15 there in the first, but Chicago came back. They led by one late in this game, 4 minutes to go in the game, but Chicago shot 32%. DeRozan 6 of 25, Levine 6 of 19, Vucevic 9 of 27, had an easy layup he missed also at the end of that game. They were 7 of 37 from three. DeMar DeRozan came out and said, I'm not going to be as bad as I was in game one. It'll be better. Okay, well, we'll see what happens with that one. No promises. Milwaukee missed 28 three-pointers. They missed 8 free throws. So the total on that game in game number one was 230. It's 225 tonight. I think they go over. This is the lowest total, 225.5 now. This is the lowest total these teams have seen now in 6 meetings. And Milwaukee's 5-0 against them this season. Now, 4 of the 5 meetings have gone under. You had a 240, a 235.5, a 230 that went under. The over was 230.5. The last under was 227. That was back in Milwaukee in mid-January. DeMar DeRozan in that game hit 17 free throws at 35 points. So basically, all of his half his points were from the free throw line. That game, Chicago was 7 of 38 from three. Kobe White was 0 of 9 from three. So the Bulls have had problems hitting threes against the Bucks this year. That's pretty simple. We know Milwaukee can bust out at any time. They were on a 6-game over streak before game one. The adjustment, I think, here down to 225, we've seen it so far in some of these from game one to game two. If we look back at it, Minnesota, Memphis over game one, under game two. Toronto, Philly over game one, under game two. Dallas, Utah under game one, over game two. Heat and Hawks. It was at 217. It closed at 221.5. It closed at 220, or it landed on 220. So take that for what you will in that one. But Denver, Golden State also flip-flop from game one to game two. So I think we get the flip-flop again. I really do in this game two in Milwaukee tonight. I really believe that. Now, who do you take as far as a side? I'd probably lean Milwaukee just because Chicago had their perfect opportunity there. Could have gone up 1-0, blew it. I think Milwaukee could run them. But also doesn't really help the total. You need a little bit of a competitive game if you're going to get to that point. But I think the Bucks take care of business. I think it goes over the total this evening. So that's the look at the 3 playoff games tonight, the game 3 in Toronto and the 2 game 2s, Boston and Milwaukee. And so many baseball games. You're starting at 140, Pirates and Brewers, first game out of the gate. White Sox and the Guardians are going to play a game today. They've been knocked out the last 2 nights. So let's keep playing these games in Cleveland in the middle of April. Don't understand that, why Cleveland isn't on the road more. The weather in Chicago the other night, it was snowing earlier in the day and it was cold. I don't get this. Like, have these teams play in places where weather like that won't knock you out. Not rain, but snow. You can avoid snow. You know it's going to snow. So you got Braves, Dodgers, 310. I think Charlie Morton pitches better today for them. You have the Giants, Mets, Carlos Rodon and Chris Bassett, a couple of former American League pitchers going at it tonight. Rodon with the White Sox, Bassett with the A's, and Rodon is he is a favorite tonight. Pitched well his last time out against Cleveland. Bassett's pitched well too with the Mets. Ohtani with the Angels. Jose Barrios, that number has dropped big time on him. Toronto, how about this number? They've alternated wins and losses in 10 straight games, coming off a loss to the Red Sox last night, 2-1. But Barrios has not been a good road favorite since getting traded to Toronto. He doesn't have great numbers against the Red Sox either. I think Boston wins that one. And Oakland 7-5. How about that? 2 American League teams with 7 wins, the Angels and the A's. Didn't see that one coming. And the Rays and Cubs, they wrap up their series at Wrigley tonight. And tomorrow you got a lot of afternoon games on the travel day in Major League Baseball. Hockey, only 4 games tonight. You have one at a reasonable time at 8:35. Stars and Oilers in Edmonton, and the 3 late games, Blackhawks and Coyotes. In Arizona, Capitals, Golden Knights, rematch of their Stanley Cup final from a few years ago. And then the Avalanche laying $3 at Seattle. Crazy. But we still have, we got a week and change left of the regular season. So at least these numbers will be a little more reasonable going into the playoffs. So we'll see how all of that turns out. But the hockey season, a lot of teams have clinched spots already. The East is spoken for. All 8 spots are clinched. The West, I believe now it's 4. Avalanche, Flames, Blues, and Wild are in, and it's still got 4 to go. And then that'll all be set by next week. So, Mike, thanks to Nick Pollack for joining us. Pitcher List. You can find him on Twitter at PitcherList, pitcherlist.com, to break down all the pitchers if you are interested in that for Major League Baseball on a day-in, day-out basis. That's the look, baseball, we talked about that with Dave Sherapan on Monday. We know it's a major grind. It is. To stay on top of these pitchers, it's a lot. And again, they're not going 9 innings. We know that. It's more of a 5, 6, 7 if you're lucky with some of these guys. In 7 today, it feels like a long time. But check him out at pitcherlist.com, and a lot of good information there as far as Major League Baseball, or even from a fantasy standpoint, not exactly, all gambling, but also from a fantasy standpoint. All right, tomorrow, Stephanie Odie will be back. She will host tomorrow, and then I'll be back on Friday. Vince Akins will join me. We'll talk NBA playoffs with him. Vince, who joined us during the NFL season, a lot of great trends that he has. And we'll talk NBA playoffs with Vince coming up on Friday at noon. Stephanie will be in tomorrow at noon. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Vegas Insider. I am Kevin Rogers. Thanks a lot for watching. And as always, best of luck with your bets.